Gerald Prince Miller, the infamous nephew of Kenneth Supreme McGriff, emerged as one of the most ruthless and strategic criminal minds of the 1980s in New York. Prince was not just another lieutenant in the drug empire. He was the driving force behind its operations when his uncle was in prison. The Supreme Team, under Prince's control, built a notorious reputation in Jamaica, Queens, by dominating the crack cocaine trade and eliminating rivals with brutal efficiency. His reign was marked by ambition, violence, and strategic brilliance, making him one of the most feared gang leaders in the city's history. The formation of the Supreme Team. Roots in the Five Percenters. To understand Prince Miller's role in the Supreme Team, it's essential to explore the gang's origins. The Supreme Team was founded in the early 1980s in the Baisley Park houses of Jamaica, Queens. Its members were young men, many of them originally followers of a quasi-religious sect known as the Five Percenters. This group espoused a philosophy centered on empowerment and self-knowledge. Yet under Kenneth Supreme McGriff's guidance, it took a darker turn toward organized crime. If you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. By 1983, McGriff had transformed the Supreme Team into a formidable drug trafficking organization. The gang quickly seized control over the local crack cocaine market, exploiting the soaring demand for the drug during the crack epidemic. This meteoric rise was accompanied by a ruthless approach to business, where violence was frequently employed as a means of securing their empire. As a result, Jamaica, Queens, became a hotspot for drug-related crime, altering the dynamics of the community forever. Prince Miller, McGriff's nephew, was a key player from the beginning. While McGriff initially led the organization, Prince quickly rose through the ranks, proving himself to be a cunning strategist and an even more ruthless enforcer than his uncle. Prince Miller's early role. Rising through the ranks, although Kenneth McGriff was the gang's undisputed leader in the early 1980s, Prince's role as second in command meant that he was intimately involved in decision-making. From the start, he was known for his intelligence and ability to command respect, not just from his peers, but also from those who feared the gang. His reputation for loyalty and efficiency in enforcing the Supreme Team's rules made him a natural leader within the organization. As the Supreme Team's drug operations grew, so did its structure. Prince helped develop a complex hierarchy designed to protect top-level members from the dangers of street-level drug dealing. He understood the importance of layers within the organization. Each level had a specific role, ensuring that the police couldn't easily trace criminal activities back to him or McGriff. This strategy was not only effective in generating enormous profits, but also in maintaining a veil of secrecy that shrouded the gang's inner workings. By 1986, the Supreme Team was generating revenues of over $200,000 per day from their crack cocaine operations. Their control of Jamaica, Queens, was absolute, and any challenge to their authority was met with swift and deadly consequences. The streets echoed the stories of their violence, reinforcing their reputation and instilling fear in the hearts of rivals and community members alike. A new leader emerges, Prince Miller's ascendancy in 1987. The landscape of the Supreme Team shifted dramatically when Kenneth McGriff was sentenced to prison on narcotics charges. With McGriff out of the picture, Prince Miller took the reins of the organization. This was not merely a power shift, it was a critical juncture that allowed Prince to truly demonstrate his capabilities as a leader. Prince's leadership style was both calculated and ruthless. One of his first moves as leader was to expand the Supreme Team's security force, ensuring that any rivals or internal threats were dealt with swiftly and decisively. He understood that maintaining control required a formidable presence, both to intimidate enemies and to enforce loyalty within the ranks. During Prince's early reign, the Supreme Team committed a series of murders to solidify its hold on the drug trade. At least 8 homicides were ordered by Prince and McGriff in 1987 alone. These killings were not merely about eliminating rivals, they were also a clear demonstration of the Supreme Team's absolute power. Their message was unmistakable. Anyone who opposed the gang would face brutal retribution. This bloody reputation further solidified Prince's position, as those around him recognized both his power and his willingness to use violence as a tool for maintaining dominance. The Supreme Team's operations. A criminal enterprise at the peak of its power, the Supreme Team operated with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Prince Miller, always one step ahead of law enforcement, structured the organization in a way that protected its leadership from prosecution. The gang employed dozens of workers, from street-level dealers to high-ranking lieutenants, each playing a specific role in the drug trade. Street-level employees were responsible for selling crack cocaine at retail spots throughout Jamaica, Queens. These spots became highly coveted territories that generated enormous amounts of money, leading to fierce competition among gang members. Supervisors, such as Tucker and Coleman, managed these retail locations, meticulously collecting the day's earnings, which would then be funneled up to Prince and other leaders. To insulate the leadership further, these supervisors often passed the money and drugs through multiple hands before it reached the top, creating a complex web that was difficult for law enforcement to penetrate. Prince's business savvy was also evident in the way he structured communication within the gang. Members used coded language and numerical systems to disguise their activities and avoid detection by law enforcement. This strategic foresight extended to physical security as well. Prince employed armed bodyguards and stationed lookouts on rooftops equipped with two-way radios to monitor police activity. This layered approach to security made it extremely challenging for law enforcement to infiltrate the gang and gather evidence against them. The role of corruption. Prince's secret weapon. One of the key factors that allowed Prince Miller and the Supreme Team to operate with such impunity was their ability to corrupt public officials. Two New York State Parole Division employees, Parole Officer Enna McGriff, no relation to Kenneth McGriff, and Secretary Ronnie Younger, played crucial roles in the gang's operations. Enna McGriff was romantically involved with Ernesto Piniella, the Supreme Team's chief of security, and Ronnie Younger had a similar relationship with Prince himself. Both women were paid by the gang to provide sensitive information and falsify records, ensuring the organization could operate without hindrance from law enforcement. Enna's assistance was particularly significant. She helped Piniella evade parole violations by falsely certifying his compliance with parole requirements. Furthermore, she provided the gang with ammunition for their firearms, further aiding their criminal activities. Perhaps the most significant assistance these women provided was intelligence on rivals and potential threats. In one instance, Prince paid them $3,000 to obtain the addresses of Henry and Isaac Bolden, two rivals who had robbed one of the Supreme Team's allies. With this critical information, Prince orchestrated their murders, once again illustrating that betrayal or opposition to the Supreme Team would not be tolerated. The gang's ability to corrupt officials like Enna McGriff and Ronnie Younger was one of the reasons they maintained control over the drug trade for so long. It wasn't just street-level dealers who feared Prince Miller. Law enforcement had to contend with the uncomfortable reality that some of their own were complicit in the very criminal activities they were trying to suppress. Violence and retaliation. The Supreme Team's reign of terror, violence was a cornerstone of Prince Miller's leadership. The Supreme Team did not merely defend its territory, it dominated Jamaica, Queens, through a relentless campaign of terror. Under Prince's command, the gang was responsible for numerous homicides, many of which were executed to eliminate rivals or disloyal members within the organization. One of the most notorious murders ordered by Prince involved James Page, a Supreme Team member suspected of cooperating with law enforcement. When Kenneth McGriff learned of Page's cooperation, he ordered his death. Prince, ever the loyal enforcer, ensured the job was completed swiftly and ruthlessly. Page's murder served as a stark warning to anyone considering betrayal. Cooperation with law enforcement would be met with swift and brutal retribution. The Supreme Team's violence extended beyond their own members. In one particularly shocking incident, Prince ordered the murder of 4 Colombian drug traffickers in 1989. These Colombians had previously supplied the gang with cocaine, but after a deal went awry, Prince perceived them as liabilities. The gang members, including CJ, Hale, and Jimenez, executed the Colombians in a brutal fashion, leaving their bodies hard to identify. This willingness to resort to extreme violence not only secured Prince's power, but also sent a chilling message to rival gangs and potential traitors. The social impacts of the Supreme Team, a community in turmoil, the reign of Prince Miller, and the Supreme Team had profound implications for the community of Jamaica, Queens. As the gang solidified its control over the crack cocaine trade, the local landscape transformed. Once vibrant neighborhoods became hotbeds of violence, addiction, and fear, drastically altering the lives of residents. The crack epidemic of the 1980s hit urban areas hard, and Jamaica was no exception. As the Supreme Team flooded the streets with crack cocaine, addiction rates skyrocketed. Families were torn apart as parents succumbed to addiction, often leaving children vulnerable and neglected. The economic strain on households became evident, as money that could have gone toward education and necessities was diverted to feed drug habits. Community programs aimed at helping residents cope with addiction and violence struggled to keep pace with the rampant drug trade. Efforts by local leaders to create positive change were often overshadowed by the Supreme Team's influence. Schools became battlegrounds for turf wars, and children were forced to navigate a perilous environment that stifled their opportunities. Violence and community fear. The Supreme Team's brutal enforcement tactics instilled a pervasive sense of fear within the community. Residents often found themselves too afraid to report crimes or cooperate with law enforcement, fearing retaliation from gang members. This culture of silence allowed the gang to thrive unchecked, further entrenching its power and influence. Local businesses faced immense pressure as the gang demanded protection payments or intimidated shop owners. Many small businesses closed their doors, unable to withstand the threats and violence. The once thriving commercial areas of Jamaica became desolate, with storefronts shuttered and crime on the rise. As law enforcement strategies adapted to combat the growing influence of gangs like the Supreme Team, the drug trade itself evolved. Prince Miller's methods set a precedent that influenced other criminal organizations, both locally and nationally. The shift to new strategies in response to increasing pressure from law enforcement, drug trafficking organizations began diversifying their operations. The Supreme Team's model, characterized by extreme violence and corruption, prompted other gangs to adopt similar tactics while also seeking new avenues for profit. As Prince and his crew demonstrated, maintaining power through fear and ruthlessness became a standard operating procedure. The rise of the crack cocaine market also paved the way for new drugs and methods of distribution. As the 1990s approached, the introduction of more potent substances like heroin and methamphetamine began to shift the dynamics of the drug trade. New players entered the scene, often employing different strategies to avoid law enforcement scrutiny, leading to an even more complex and dangerous drug landscape. Lasting consequences. The legacy of Prince Miller and the Supreme Team extends far beyond their immediate influence in Jamaica, Queens. The scars left on the community continue to affect generations. Issues like addiction, poverty, and violence remain prevalent as the societal impacts of the drug trade linger. Programs aimed at rehabilitation and community rebuilding face significant challenges, often requiring a delicate balance of resources and support. For many, the fight against the remnants of the Supreme Team's influence is ongoing, and healing the community will take years of dedicated effort. As law enforcement successfully dismantled the Supreme Team and brought key figures like Prince Miller to justice, the repercussions of his actions continue to resonate. The lessons learned from his rise and fall provide insight into the complexities of organized crime and its societal effects. Prince Miller's story serves as a cautionary tale about the allure of power and the devastating consequences of a life steeped in violence and criminality. His initial success and influence masked a darker reality, one that ultimately led to his downfall and the suffering of countless individuals. The cycle of violence and addiction that characterized his reign serves as a stark reminder of the human cost associated with the drug trade. The ongoing struggle for justice even today. The struggle for justice in communities affected by drug-related crime continues. Law enforcement, community leaders, and activists work tirelessly to reclaim neighborhoods, dismantle drug networks, and support individuals seeking recovery from addiction. The fight against the influence of organized crime is not just about law enforcement, it's about restoring hope and building resilience in communities scarred by violence. Legacy of a criminal mastermind. The rise and fall of Prince Miller serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked ambition and violence. Once at the pinnacle of power in Jamaica, Queens, he was ultimately undone by the very strategies he employed to secure his dominance. His ability to manipulate and control his organization through fear and brutality led to a reign that, while fearsome, was always precarious. Prince Miller's story is a reminder that the quest for power often comes with a price. The violence and corruption that characterized his leadership not only led to his downfall, but also left a lasting scar on the community he sought to dominate. Today, his legacy serves as a stark reflection of the dangerous allure of the drug trade and the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement. As society continues to grapple with the impact of drug-related crime, the narrative of Prince Miller and the Supreme Team remains a poignant example of the cycles of power, violence, and eventual reckoning that define the world of organized crime. The strategic genius behind the Supreme Team's rise. Gerald Prince Miller was far more than a mere enforcer within the Supreme Team. He was a mastermind whose strategic brilliance fueled the gang's meteoric rise in New York's underworld. While many criminal leaders relied solely on fear and violence, Prince understood the importance of structure, hierarchy, and forward planning. He approached organized crime like a business, implementing systems that insulated the gang's leadership from direct involvement in street-level crimes. By creating multiple layers of management and delegating responsibilities, he ensured that the Supreme Team could operate like a well-oiled machine, generating massive profits while keeping the higher utilers out of the legal spotlight. His intelligence and strategic acumen were pivotal in transforming the gang from a local entity into a drug trafficking empire. Prince was also instrumental in involving corrupt officials who provided valuable protection and information, further shielding the gang from law enforcement. His ability to foresee threats and neutralize them before they became a problem was a hallmark of his leadership, enabling the Supreme Team to dominate the crack cocaine trade for years. Expanding power and influence. Prince Miller's hold on Jamaica, Queens. Prince Miller's leadership not only expanded the Supreme Team's criminal operations, but also its grip over Jamaica, Queens. Miller was not satisfied with merely controlling the local drug trade. He sought to entrench the gang's power within the social and economic fabric of the community. Through calculated violence, Miller enforced a regime of fear, which extended to local residents and businesses. Intimidation was a powerful tool, as it silenced potential informants and ensured that law enforcement had few leads to follow. Business owners in Jamaica, Queens, were coerced into paying protection money, and anyone who defied the Supreme Team faced swift and brutal retaliation. Prince's ability to control both his criminal enterprise and the community allowed the gang to function almost with impunity. His influence permeated every level of the neighborhood, making it incredibly difficult for authorities to dismantle the organization. Schools, local businesses, and even community leaders found themselves navigating a perilous environment shaped by the Supreme Team's dominance. Prince was a calculated leader, understanding that control of the streets wasn't just about brute force. It was about controlling the very heartbeat of the community, turning it into an extension of the gang's operations. The fall of Prince Miller, a violent legacy of power and downfall. Despite his strategic foresight and meticulous planning, Prince Miller's reign over the Supreme Team and Jamaica, Queens, was ultimately doomed by the very violence and corruption that had once secured his power. The gang's reliance on brutal tactics to maintain control created an atmosphere of fear that could not last forever. Prince's expansion, which involved a web of violent enforcers, drug dealers, and corrupt officials, eventually attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the rise and fall of Prince Miller, a true icon of the underworld. If you found this story intriguing, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more captivating tales from the dark corners of criminal history. Stay tuned to Underworld Icons for more stories that expose the minds and actions behind some of the most notorious figures in organized crime. Until next time, stay safe